Our fans will be so pleased.
Yeah, right. Yeah, sure. I don't know how many followers we have. I've never looked, but it's probably like it's got to be in like the single digits, right? Or I don't know. Joe tweets, so maybe there's like dozens of them.
Mhm.
We have 33 subscribers.
I'm shocked that we have that many.
Yeah, I bet half of them are like Joe. So,
I was gonna say, how inflated are these numbers?
yeah.
I would say maybe they're mostly bots, right? But
That's probably true.
We're not expecting Natalie today, right? She's on vacation now.
Right. She's on vacation.
Let's get started then. I can run this thing. I haven't done that in a while. First up, everyone please sign into the document. I will relink the document here in the chat, just in case you don't have it handy. And while folks are doing that, maybe we can go through status updates. Want to kick us off, Jesse?
Sure. Let's see. The only thing I really have outstanding right now for this team is I've got a PR outstanding to the proof of concept PR that does the Conoco style Docker files stuff. And so I think someone said they were going to give that a look today. So I'm hoping to get that merged in. It's kind of our very rough POC end to end, extending build, extending run, and kind of pushing it all together and checking that it did what we think it did. So I'd like to get that pushed in so we can continue iterating and answer the hard questions.
Ready for folks to start playing with?
Yeah, as long as you set up a registry, it just works. Like it's just sort of assuming there's a registry to push and pull the bits that happen during the Conoco, so we don't have to deal with like registry. It needs to be an unauthorized registry and stuff like that, right? But it's it's good enough, and there's a test script in that branch to run through that does all the Docker steps.
Cool.
So
that's exciting. Anyone else want to give a status update? Take that as no. Oh, do I see Juan?
Yeah.
I saw you touching your mic. Do you want to give us an update?
Yes, I'm almost done. I maybe we can check a little bit the RFC I've been working on at the end or something. Yeah, that's my update.
Moving on to release planning. We just released that patch. I'm assuming that's it for now. Although the next set of releases is pretty small, right? So we might actually be thinking about new API versions in the near future.
Yeah. Yeah, before Natalie left, she did leave we could get an R014 RC out, but I have not had the time or means to do that yet. And there's a couple blockers as well for that.
Any of those blockers, things you want to talk about here or that this group could help with?
We probably should at least call out the spec PRs when we get to that section, if that's the section in this meeting. I think it is. Just to make sure that at least folks on this team have given their thoughts on it.
Up next, let's look at the needs discussion items. There's one here. Let me share it. User unset when using creator lifecycle. Does anyone have context here? Want to fill us in briefly? I'm not up to speed on what's going on here.
Yeah, I'm not either. We haven't talked about this in a while, so I kind of wonder if this is. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure when the needs. Okay, it was added on December 13th. Looks like Natalie's the only one who has any context here. It looks like there's a workaround as well.
Mhm.
So I think we can push this and see what Natalie had in mind next time she's around.
Okay, sounds good. Well, that's it for needs discussion. So let's move on to RFCs here. There are this poor sub team. It's like all of the RFCs, including all of the most complicated ones. Is there
Yeah.
any one in particular you want to talk about today? I don't know if we want to do the status of all of them, right?
I don't have any that I particularly am interested in discussing myself, but happy to discuss any of them if anyone else has any.
I don't know, Emily, if I've brought this up in the past, or if we came to a conclusion. But I do recall that some of these RFCs have this idea that we want to more or less wait until certain parts are done. I think the daemon being ejected is one of those things. I guess I'm not on the same wavelength as kind of hoping that the daemon be ejected before a lot of these things come into play. Simple things like OCI recommended annotations. It doesn't necessarily make sense because PAC, for instance, would still need to find a way to solve this once the life cycle stops using the daemon. So it's just really kind of reallocating the need to solve a problem or a challenge or to acknowledge a difference. So yeah, I don't know if, again, you have any thoughts there or if that has changed.
I think I was the one pushing really hard for we should do the demon stuff first, even before approving these RFCs. After hearing everyone's arguments at working group last week, I think I've come around to the other side where we could, maybe approve these RFCs first. But I do want to prioritize implementing the demon change. Especially because right now, like we have a couple, maybe like one or two issues about like image references and labels where, behavior is different between the registry and the daemon. But as we approve these things, those two cases will diverge more and more in ways that I'm uncomfortable with. And also getting rid of the daemon, something we've wanted to do for a long time. So I don't want to just live with the daemon problem forever. We've been talking about it for a long time, and I think I'd like to move forward on it. But if no one thinks that blocking these RFCs is the right way to do that or the right time to do that, I'm okay. But I want to figure out how we can move forward on it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely all for extracting the daemon case. And I'm with you on, I think that seems like high priority. Execution seems a little bit difficult, right? To rally the troops around the daemon extraction when there's higher, bigger items at play at the moment. But like the OCI, recommend annotations, that seems like very low hanging fruit. That I do wonder whether prioritizing that after the daemon extraction is useful, right? So like I feel like we could do the OCI annotations fairly quickly and just say, daemon here or not. It's almost irrelevant, I guess.
I guess one of the reasons, like in my like 3-step thought process that got me here, especially for OCI recommended annotations, is that the reason these things feel coupled to me is that this current proposal is recommending that the life cycle add these recommended annotations, but I actually don't think that the life cycle should be making those kind of specific decisions. Instead, I think we should augment the build pack API such that a build pack can add an annotation to an image. And then, you could have a build pack that adds all these recommended ones if you want to. I think that sort of fits with our plan going forward, especially like, how you could implement Project Toml with a build pack kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, right? Like, I think the strategy for how annotations are done makes sense.
Yeah, but it just that makes the differences between the daemon and the registry feel worse to me almost when it's now the build pack is expressly saying like, add this annotation in the life cycles. Like, that's the daemon, so I'm just going to drop it on the floor,
Hey, gotta complain to the daemon.
Yeah. And for some reason in my mind, like I know that, we're going to have some sort of pack load situation. So eventually, even when we get rid of the daemon, we're going to put it on the file system and then we'll load it into the daemon. And the version that gets loaded into the daemon still will not have those annotations.
Exactly. So now pack is the one that dropped,
that dropped it on the floor. But for some reason that feels better to me than the lifecycle dropping it on the floor. But I guess just because it's better doesn't mean we have to do it in that order. I'm okay with a slightly less good order. I'm willing to concede that one. But I worry that in the context of this project, we never really prioritize tech debt. And I see the daemon problem as like 85% tech debt, 15% product problem.
Yeah, I would agree with that. That's kind of how I feel about it. Like, I think we should prioritize it. I don't know, from just a philosophical standpoint, I don't know whether we should block RFCs on things that we are mostly technical debt, but but I think they're two different streams of work, the product work. And as long as RFCs are about the product, I think that's fine. And like, we dictate our own schedule. And so I think it's fine to push things based on tech debt, but I don't know that it has to block the approval of the RFC, just the implementation of it and how we implement it. That's kind of where I stand on it.
Because if we never clean up any of this stuff, we're going to get to a point where it's impossible to make progress. Even simple things like this are hard because of the fact that we haven't removed the daemon already. Like, you're going to run into a lot of compromises really quickly. It's like we have this image interface, an image util. Are you going to add things to it like set annotation that just don't work in the daemon case? Like, you're going to quickly get into a situation where you have to make ugly compromises that you wouldn't if we'd done it the other way.
Yeah, I think it's not just all about execution, right? I think we all agree. It's just more or less how do we actually achieve it.
Although I do want to come back and make this I'd like to encourage Sam to make this a proposal that's about build packs setting annotations, not about specific recommended annotations.
Agreed.
I guess one of the other things I want to talk about, sort of a theme that's gone through a lot of our RFC conversations lately, which is about whether or not we're going to continue making breaking changes to APIs like the build pack API. Because we had been doing that, I was just sort of assuming we were going to keep going in that direction. but it seems like there's some pushback from Joe and Terrence on behalf of build pack authors that people don't like having to make changes when they update the API. For me, I have trouble totally buying into that argument because if you don't want to make changes, I don't see why you want to update the API anyways, right? It's like I can change this number in my build pack tumble file and not change anything else and it still works. But why did I even bother changing that number? Like, what have I accomplished? But I guess, when we tie it to new features, that's when that starts breaking down. Like if you want to set an annotation, you'll have to upgrade, right? I'm just curious how everyone else was feeling about that, especially from a lifecycle implementation perspective, where I feel like that's where the rubber would meet the road for decisions like this.
Yeah. I know Terrence has stronger feelings on this than I do. Like, I don't know. I'm okay with making these sort of breaking changes personally. Like, I think it's healthy for the project to be able to do that and practice at doing that for one thing as well. Like, if we don't ever make any breaking changes, then it will be especially hard when we decide that we really want one. And I think that if the API versions aren't there to allow us to make that flexibility, I don't really, I don't know. I don't get it.
And if I'm not mistaken, the build pack APIs are all compatible with each other, right? Like you have build pack 03 and build pack 09 all within the same order, and there's a compatibility layer built into the lifecycle of sorts.
Yep.
Yeah, I think definitely for me, and this is a different side of things, the platform API, I think is very different beast, right? I think that one requires less changes, less often, more stability, because platform implementers don't want to go back and have to keep updating their stuff to then be able to use, arbitrary builders and so forth.
I think the platform API is the one where I feel like breaking changes end up being the most necessary, even if they're ugly. Because, if like, in order to implement something like applying Docker files, we need to like reorder the phases. Then like, there's not a lot you can do about that, right?
Yeah.
And especially like a lot of the new big features that people want are going to require platforms to, read and implement carefully. But luckily, I think there are fewer platforms, right? And they, for the most part, are motivated to provide these features in a way that might be different from a large group of build pack authors that it feels more inconvenienced by these changes.
I don't know that I would completely agree with that argument, because if I look at things like GitLab Auto Ops, I'm not sure that they've touched it since they first implemented it, which means that they're probably in a much older platform API, right? So once we say like, hey, we're going to have these builders, and these builders now have these Docker files that they execute, and all these changes, those builders are no longer compatible, is my understanding.
Does the GitLab Auto Ops use Pack, or does it directly orchestrate the lifecycle?
It's a good question.
I don't know.
I feel like the whole class of platforms that we sort of talked about as different platforms that all use Pack are really just one platform, which is Pack, right? And like Pack in a bunch of different contexts. Because they're not actually using the platform API, right? They're using Pack's API, which makes it sort of a different question of evolution and breaking changes.
Yeah, I think the motivation is there for platforms to do those changes, like this phase swapping, like, and they can make that decision on their own, for the features they want. Like I don't think one of our platforms, we haven't done the latest ones that do some of the SBOM stuff, because none of the build packs that we're currently using don't really mess with SBOM yet. And it's okay. But at some point, like when, Docker files happens, we're going to want to get in there and break things. And I think it's okay for that to be, tougher than a normal upgrade. Like the platforms are supposed to be the ones who do that sort of work, I think.
I feel like part of the reason I'm probing at it right now is because there's some RFCs here that are largely, or to some extent cosmetic, right? It's like, we'd like to make the file structure look better. We would like to, like have environment variables instead of positional arguments, stuff like that. And how much I want to do those at all depends on whether we can ever get rid of the old stuff. It's like, if we have to keep both forever, then I don't know that it's actually more aesthetically pleasing to add the new one, because then there's just more ways to do the same thing.
I know in one of the conversations we had about, what 1.0 would look like and maybe a 2.0, right? Like future thinking type stuff. Terrence brought up the idea of, imagine a world where 1.0, right? Let's say you have 1.0, then 1.1, 1.2, so forth. And in each one of those, sort of, iterative, minor releases, you would be adding features, right? It would be additive features in a sense. But it would be like in a non-breaking format. And then once you get to the next major version, then that becomes the purge, right? So then at that point you drop everything. So I wonder if, again, I argue we're already at 1.0, but if we envision, 0 dot whatever, right? We're making all these changes. We're still doing it consciously to have some backwards compatibility aspect to it. But then once we transition to 1.0, that becomes the point in which we, purge the stuff that you want to purge.
I think that was always sort of the plan for once we hit 1, like that's what 1 to 2 looks like. If we ever make it to 2, that's what 2 to 3 looks like. But we decided to sort of treat each of these minors like that because we had enough cases where we were breaking things. So maybe what you're saying is we should go to 1.0 now. Like, I think that's almost the same argument, which is like, if we now want to move, but if we want to stop breaking things, which we have been doing, we have been breaking things, we want to stop breaking things. I think we would start calling that 1.0 rather than treating the whatever's differently.
I think a lot of it has to do, in my mind, I agree with everything there. It's just, I don't know if we could feasibly do it for removing stacks.
Yeah.
Right? When we remove stacks, that seems such a big change that I'm not sure how we would have a backwards compatible method. And so I do wonder if that is the, the thing that says, all right, we're 1.0, we got rid of stacks.
To get rid of stacks, add Docker files. Like, yes, that'll be painful, but we're moving on from there.
That's kind of what I would do, I think, most because I think that build packs in its current state with stacks is just less portable and less awesome for users who just want to like try build packs from different, it's just kind of hard. Like, and so it would be really nice, I think, to ship that and like give a folks a reason to upgrade to 1.0, and then also stack authors to do what they need to do there. And we may have to introduce some shims and stuff to kind of make some of that easier, so it's just not such a pain. Like, we don't want to have 10 versions of builders floating around. Yeah, I like that idea.
The scary part for me is because it hasn't been tried, right? Like, we don't know what negative impacts removing the stacks may have in a practical application. Like, we might need quick additional changes. So that's the only scary part, right? It's to go like to 1.0 and then all of a sudden realize like, holy crap, this doesn't work the way that we wanted it to. 1.1, right? And never use 1.0.
Yeah. Well, but that's why I think maybe we should stick with our breaking minors that we've been doing. Like you could roll it out in a breaking minor. If it goes well, then we go to 1.0.
The scary part with that is whether people would, platforms specifically, have the incentive to do so, right? And I guess that number might be a smaller set of platforms that don't use PAC, but like Tecton, KPAC, and PAC at minimum would all have to go through major changes if we're not going to provide any sort of compatibility.
I
Or
think we
backwards
provide,
Mhm.
I think for this, we have to provide a strategy for backwards compatibility. It's just about whether we can eventually remove that strategy, right? In my mind,
If you think that's
yeah.
doable, I think that is preferable. I just feel like it's going to be a little overwhelming. But that's
Yeah, I
just,
think we kind of have to lead the way with pack almost. Like the pack create builder is going to probably be responsible in my mind for like creating some of these like whatever life cycle needs to do the job of like old stack, new stack, or old stack and now no stack potentially, right? So that when folks create a new builder, even on like the next point version of pack, then it's compatible with both old and like what we think is the future with no stack, without them having to do anything for the build to the builder really. Because like we can get all the like distro and stuff, or at least attempt to, right?
I wonder what a good strategy for that would be. Like, is it design first? Like think through how to best do it? Or is it like a POC style where it's like, okay, I'm going to create a pack that creates these no stack builders and then be like, okay, now how do I make this work with old life cycle?
With old build packs, with old life cycle.
Yeah, I think that's kind of what we need really. Like I think having a builder that has been refreshed that has, so we can start figuring out what we actually need on that builder to make it work and how lifecycle needs to see those builders, and so that it can execute those build packs and lie to the build packs of old about the stack or something, you know?
Yeah.
I guess it really comes down to sort of like what order we think makes sense to encourage things to move in. Because rather than starting with sort of like a base image that isn't a stack, I was sort of imagining it going the other way, where you have a bunch of build packs that express requirements in terms of these first level concepts rather than stacks, right? Like I need a Linux, I need a whatever. Then you have these images, the stack images, like it doesn't hurt anyone to leave all those old labels around, right? So I feel like the stack images themselves, just need to add new metadata in order to work. They don't need to remove old stuff.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Like there's nothing, like it's an additive, right? Like all the stuff we're talking about that defines a stack is all net new labels that has to happen. So it's really just up to life cycle interpreting the build packs that it's executing and giving them the data and validating it against both old and new.
Okay.
But maybe that's a thing we need to do sooner than later, is have pack create builder start adding those labels, even to folks who haven't added it to their Docker file for the builder, right? Like, I don't know if it needs to be behind a flag or anything at first or whatever, experimental, but like, force having those labels on there or whatever we need to start making sure that platforms are producing builders that can work in a newer world.
I guess the challenge I have is thinking through this. is PAC is going to change the way that a builder is created, where there's no mention of a stack, right? Like there's no stack ID, there's no nothing. How does it come up with those terms or those legacy labels?
When you create a builder right now, do you specify a stack ID?
That
No,
would be
right?
on the
It's just
build
like there's just
view.
a label on the build image and the run image that happens to match. And we might validate it, but we don't.
Yeah, so that validation would go away.
The
right?
validation would go away. But I think who's ever making the build and run image could leave the label there if they want it to be backwards compatible, right?
Yeah, Impact could do some stuff warning them if they don't have it, right? Be like, this won't work with older, platform versions or whatever. And it could also have a forward-facing warning if you don't have those labels. Like maybe just having a warning in Pack is sort of the first step of not having these once we approve the RFC for maybe
And like
six.
we could warn, be like, it might not work with older build packs, right? Because older build packs, sometimes they read the stack ID. We give that to them. So I think you should be able to create a builder from stack images that aren't annotated with a bunch of backwards compatible metadata. But I think if you do, you get a warning that's like, by the way, you might fake out some build packs. Or when we're creating the builder, we can see what build packs we're adding. So if they're old and they need that information, then we can very explicitly tell people that they're getting themselves in trouble. But if they're new, we can be like, oh, it's all going to be fun.
Could you elaborate on how do we know if they need it? Build
Because of their
pack,
build pack API.
Either build pack toml, the target stacks, right? Like you could slurp up all the different build pack tomls and look at the ones that are below a certain API and look at their stack IDs. And if you don't have a stack ID, then I guess you could throw up a big error.
No, I think stack ID is required, right, on older build pack APIs? Or is it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if the image you're targeting, your new build image doesn't have the CNB stack
Oh.
ID, then you could start throwing an error.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that seems reasonable.
Pack can be the guardrails in a lot of ways. Like some people create builders without pack, like KPack does, but that's okay. That's their problem. We can have pack be the guardrails where we test all this stuff out, and then
Yeah, Pack also does the hard job of creating ephemeral builders, so it can add that validation to that area as well to be like you've chosen a build pack with an older API that has a stack ID that's not compatible, which it probably already does stack validation today.
Yeah.
So that would probably fail anyway.
Cool. Yeah, that seems like a reasonable path forward for this.
I guess getting back to the agenda here.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I do kind of want to open up these spec ones that Natalie's looking for input on. I think she called Emily out in at least one of them.
Oh, am I getting called out? That seems fair. Did I copy?
I'll,
I did not
I'll-
copy. There's something in the agenda here for this.
Okay, I'll paste them in the agenda. It's one.
All right. I act this call out.
There you go. There's 3 things there. Oh, I pasted the same one twice.
Yeah, this all makes sense. Thank you.
And so now she's got some questions she's looking for feedback on those 2 spec ones. I need to read over them as well today so that we can get alignment so that we can cut the next version of lifecycle.
there anything we want to do here with these other than a name and shame?
I don't think so. I think just raising it up so that we can get alignment eventually. That's all.
Uh, And then I guess the next thing on the agenda is looking ahead for the next 2 weeks.
I guess that came across as a standing item. Yeah.
I just copied it down. I'm not sure what that means. I mean, I can guess from the words, but
Yeah, I think in the next 2 weeks, I would be happy if we got 014 out in alignment on those two spec things. And then it would be really good to start having some serious conversations about getting rid of the demon. Figuring out what that, how we approach that as a team and start doing the hard work on it.
I know, Juan, you're working on an RFC for that, right? Is that linked in the RFC repo, or is that like a HackMD at the moment? I'd love to read through that as well.
Yeah, it's on, let me paste it here. It's on HackMD yet, but I think I'm going to move it to the repo. Just let me go through it so you can see it, and then you can read it when you have some time, and maybe left some stuff there. Okay. Okay, so I did some changes to this image based on Natalie feedback. She wanted me to remove some actors and components that are not worried about this part yet. So at the end, so we just want to remove this interaction between the life cycle and the daemon. That's part of the motivation. And in a high level, then the solution is to move responsibility to the platform and then remove the connection we did before. So that's the high level idea. Anything behind that one, if that idea is not the one we want. So that's a good place to left a comment. So the way it works, I divided into sections. First, from platform perspective, which we are moving some responsibilities to this component. So the way I tried to express this one was with an example. So the idea is now platform, sorry. Come on. Okay, great. I don't know what happened here. So, okay, so the idea is platform needs to send to the life cycle the store. Okay, what the hell is going on with my, wait a second, let me refresh this. Okay, yeah. So I did it with simulating, like some platforms will use a tool similar to Scopio or what Scopio is doing, right? So, for example, in this case, it is interacting with the daemon to download in OCI format this Alpine image, right? And then when this image is saved, it will look like the OCI layout format, right? So, and at the end, when the life cycle finished its job, it will provide the platform with the image created during the build in the same format with the OCI layout specification, right? And then the platform needs to push that image into the daemon because that's what the user is expecting. So it can use the same thing as before, but now in the opposite path, taking the image in OCI format and then pushing that one to a daemon. And then at the end of that, then the user can see the expected image in the Docker daemon. So more or less from platform perspective, that's what we are proposing, right? That it should be taking care of interacting with the daemon to pull or to push the images, and also maybe against it could be against a registry. So for example, if I'm trying to download this Alpine image from a registry, then it can do the same thing and put the image for the life cycle in that format. Okay, then
Can I ask a quick question?
yeah.
I definitely see the point of loading it back into the daemon for people. Like that's a nice thing for Pack to do. But why would we want to take images out of the daemon? Sort of like in this case, we're talking about turning like the run image into an OCI layout to pass it to the life cycle. I'm wondering if we would rather force people to have to provide either like an image on the file system or an image in the registry. Because I think if we use the daemon as a source of images, we're going to be losing annotations and other things.
So this seems like a pack specific conversation, right? I think the OCI layout piece is within the realm of the lifecycle platform kind of conversation. I think that could be a separate conversation. So like, I guess if we want to talk about pack, we can do that, right? Like of what makes sense there, or we could talk about some of that and how that may influence the lifecycle platform API. Because I have thought through, but I thought I'm not sure that I want to increase the scope to this. But right now, on the OCI part, we're basically saying everything is layout, right? So if you pass a layout path, everything is layout. Everything's on the file system. You pull from that layout, you add to that layout.
Yes.
The mix
like
and
that.
match part is the part that adds complexity to the lifecycle.
I think everything should be layout or registry, right?
Right. But
Yeah.
then,
It's two paths.
Yes.
yes, I agree with that. But do we want to mix and match is really the question, right? Do we want to say, place my image in OCI layout, but take the previous image, for instance, from the registry? Or do we...
I did that in the POC because I didn't have the run image there. So I needed in order to the POC to work. So in the POC, it's mixed. I'm checking if I do not have the run image, then I go to the registry and download it from there. But I don't know if that's what we want in the final behavior, right? I think the best is avoid having things mixed. Even that could make the life easier, right, to the platform, because platform can worry just about maybe the previous image and that's it. It doesn't have to download the run image and put it in OCI layout format. But I'm not sure if that's going to make a little bit complex the implementation of the life cycle, and I don't know if that's worth it.
Torn. I feel like we could with, good abstractions and image util, like actually just make everything totally work. And it just downloads things when it needs them to turn into layouts. Like you can make it pretty easy to plug and play any of these things into each other. And from a UX perspective as a user, I would expect any of that to work. But the performance is going to be really bad if you are taking in some of these cases, right?
Yeah, and also the Docker files makes this maybe impossible with OCI layout without knowing, like because it's going to need to pull, like you can change the from image, right? And like do your own from image in like a Docker file in the future. And so that's going to be impossible to have on the layout. Lifecycle would have to do that for you from somewhere. So I feel like we won't fully be disconnected. Like Lifecycle could still do that and spit it out onto OCI layouts for the few further stages, but Lifecycle is going to have to turn something into OCI layout at some point anyway. So it makes me kind of wonder if we should just do mostly registry and then OCI layout at the end only, really.
So from what I'm hearing, it sounds like the preferred method for simplicity and robustness, simplicity, performance, and robustness would be to take inputs from anything, right? So like from, let's say, sorry, from a registry specifically. And that would be the only input source. And then allow the output to be OCI layout or registry.
It depends, right? So if you're outputting to a layout, a registry input is less performant because you have to download all that stuff to make a full output.
Correct.
If you're outputting to a layout, you want your input to be having your input be a layout is more performant.
Correct.
I mean, but
Making
someone
it-
has to do that work anyway, right? Like,
Yeah.
so Pack would have to turn your,
Mhm.
it would have to go fetch from Docker Hub to spit it out to give it to Lifecycle in the first place. So Lifecycle doing that in the exporter phase only means that you don't have to do that work until you're exporting, at least, right? Like you're pushing that work off until the very end because you don't need those OCI layouts for the base image until you're about to write it to OCI layout.
Yeah, I think with the caching and other things, you could sort of make it work okay. I'd have to think it through.
The only other downside to registry only is for Pack, and this is maybe selfish, but if we only have the daemon, right, then, and the image only exists in the daemon, that means we have to spin up a registry and literally proxy everything through that registry to then go find it in the daemon. So we have to set up a process essentially. Right?
My hot take, and like I haven't thought this through as much as like one has, so I could be convinced that I'm wrong. But I feel like having the life cycle do both layout and registry in any combination of inputs is probably where we want to get to in the end, because we could think of different ways to cache or do platform things to make it more performant. And if we're making some compromise along the way, we could warn when people have a combination of things that's like, this is going to take a long time, by the way, you know.
The only additional complexity that I could think of, and I've been thinking about this for a while already, so it might just be the good opportunity, is we need to have a way to signify where the image is located, right? If it's OCI or registry. And so here comes in like the URI schemas that we built for Pack, right? Like now we could drive those into the life cycle. I think that would be beneficial overall.
Not to derail this, those URI schemas, they're still the thing I mess up. I still mess them up all the time when I'm trying to test out my build packs. I'm always like accidentally getting build packs from the build pack registry when I'm trying to use a daemon image, and like I cannot get those things to work right the first try
Perfect.
ever.
I like the
Perfect.
Scopio ones that were in this. Like it was very specific, like the Docker daemon or the. I also love that your HackMD just keeps.
Yeah, I think we
infinitely scrolling.
definitely were influenced by the Scopio ones. I think the problem is the default might be what Emily you're running into. But I do think that there's value in that, right? If we use the URI schemas more throughout the the whole domain, then we could find issues like that, right? Like where it's clunky or it doesn't make sense, and really kind of iron that piece out of it as well.
I'm on board with the mix and match, but I do think you have to be able to force it one way or the other, because I think otherwise we're in this weird situation where like Pack OCI layouts your run image, but then we end up pulling it for some reason somewhere else, like when we're doing like run extensions, and like it doesn't come from the OCI layout, and it's like, oh whoops, like well we extended a different image, like because you're going to reference images with Pack that aren't on a registry anywhere. But what if it happens to be a registry? Now you've got like a supply chain problem on accident. Like Like, I think we need to be very explicit here if we're going to be pulling from like multiple sources.
Okay.
Yeah, that is true, right? I think that's the other added complexity. Like the run image is baked into some label at some point, right? And that doesn't have a schema, right? Like, so that one is intended to be pulled from, AKA the single source of truth. And if we just have this, either your layout or your registry, then there's no real confusion as to where we should be getting it from.
Yep, because then it would just fail. Like we couldn't find the run image. Then you're like, oh, I need to pull the run image. Like it's a very obvious fix instead of like, oh, it pulled a run image last time, but it's not the one I expect because I was building a custom one. But now it's, anyway. I see some confusion happening if we don't make it easy to understand.
The Dockerfile stuff makes it much harder to reason about.
I guess, where does all this conversation put us? I know we're running out of time, and I think knowing the direction that we want to go would be useful.
Well, okay, for what I understood was, okay, maybe I can add some section regarding these combinations of inputs and outputs. I tried to do something similar in a table here, but what it is, yeah, I don't know why this thing is moving. Okay, I tried to do that with how the image name provide by the user and how it's expected to life cycle to deal with it. Maybe I can try to put something similar with a table, and then when we discuss that, we can, put the final thoughts on each combination, and I don't know, the good things and the bad things, and I don't know. I can try to do that.
I would definitely suggest that we keep it separate from the core of what you have here. So whether it be like an alternative or like in an open question section,
Okay.
but something that basically says like, we're thinking about whether we should allow for combinations of these two, and kind of dive into some of the drawbacks and benefits, all that kind of stuff, and what that would look like.
Okay.
But I
Okay.
would, because I think we just heard a lot of, pretty serious concerns that I don't know if it would be the right approach for at least the first iteration.
Yes, and I'm worried about what Jesse mentioned, right? We are working on the Docker feature, Dockerfile feature, and then we have extensions and many alternate or many paths the users can take with different inputs, and yeah, we can mess things up. So
Almost makes me
okay,
want to walk back OCI layout and just say registry only, because you can do registry proxies, and like we could probably give that to like Conoco or Builda to like push and pull from a registry that is hosted by the platform, in this case, like Pack. And then
Yeah,
like,
I mean, that is the alternative.
like I don't know, like it sounds a lot simpler in theory, but I don't know in practice whether that's going to be like a huge performance problem or not. But it does make me worry.
okay, yeah, okay, got it.
Yeah, maybe that's the other alternative. If you don't have it on here already, it's like literally registry only.
For input.
For both. Like the lifecycle would never know anything about OCI images or OCI layout, sorry. It would only know
Okay.
about registry.
If it only talks to remote registries, then then it's on the platform like Pack to pull it out of there if you want to make a tar, or if you want to put it in the daemon, it would pull it from its own registry and push it into the daemon.
Yeah. And I think one of the initial diagrams I provided to
Yeah.
you was one of the options, and it has
Yes.
its own kind of drawbacks too. But
Yeah.
flip a table.
Well, take a look and left comments if you have some time there.
Thanks so much for doing that.
Don't worry, it's okay.
Yeah. I've been dreaming of this RFC for years. It's finally happening. Thank you so much.
We'll see y'all next time.
Have a good one.